everyone. I think I have a lot of my good friends here, and I think that's good. Today, first of all, I would like to thank Messi Munchin and IPMMA for inviting me here. That's, I think, a great opportunity, not only for me, for everyone in this program. There have been many programs which are going on from morning. Probably, I think one of the most difficult one is after lunch. I think, I hope we would be able to do good justice. After this case study, we're going to have a session on supply chain resilience. So ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about, we have been talking about manufacturing, packaging, we're talking about technology, AI yesterday. I was part of this program and it was very interesting. Overall, when you look at the pharmaceutical supply chain, is something which has entered into a period of sustained, I would say, structural stress for geopolitical fragmentation which is going on, tariff volatility we have all seen because of the war, as well as because of the US policies, concentrated active ingredient sourcing which is happening in very few areas. And I would say few things which we will talk about today is a fragile cold chains and overall rising demand unpredictability which is going on, which has converged to make disruption in the supply chain in the pharmaceutical industry across the globe and not only in India. When we look at the preparedness where we are today over the last few years, we see that for last 3 decades, the pharmaceutical supply chains were mainly optimized and focused on how do we assure cost and quality optimization in the industry. And we were looking at small concentrated manufacturing units in low-cost geographies. You all are aware, whether it is Sikkim, whether it is Badi, whether it is Jammu, whether it is some zones in Gujarat, and in areas like Vizag. Overall, this assumption that we are talking about supply chain from the cost point of view, it got a disruption in the last few years, practically more and more in 2026. And all you are aware that what happened during the COVID times, many of the organizations suffered, whether it is the API industry, whether it is a drug product. And what it has been exposed is, over the last few years, there are 4 and 5 areas which we'll talk about. And I think the supply chain really starts from, if not sourcing, I would say starts from really procurement, sourcing, manufacturing, the cold chain, the distribution which we see in areas just before manufacturing, and also what is happening after manufacturing. So these forces of disruption are happening everywhere, not only in the pharmaceutical industry, but it's happening in the food industry, in the FMCG industry, everywhere. What we are looking at today is how do we create this resilience in the supply chain and prevent the kind of a major disruptions which are happening, which are driving today projects of creating resilience. And what we are talking today is a snapshot of what is happening in the industry. But you will see more and more projects are being taken in a larger pharmaceutical companies who are growing large into the global markets and less in the small and medium scale enterprises. When you ask these areas, supply chain resilience, people say, what? What are you talking about? Here, we're talking about cost optimization, availability, access. That's more important rather than looking at cold chain disruptions or API disruptions. So, I would also just giving overview. After that, we're going to take a very brief case study, and I think I'm going to drive you all towards 5 drivers of this supply chain resilience. you will see that India we call as a pharmacy of the world. And yet, if you look at the supply chain, that remains one of the most fragile links today in the industry. We say a US 30 billion export engine. India is sitting on a supply chain that imports approximately 72% of the bulk drugs from a single sourcing country like China. And very interesting to note that every year, 1% of the total sales goes into expiry. Some companies it may be 2%, sometimes it is between 1 and 2%. And after so many years of being there and called a pharmacy of the world, we are saying that if there is a recall, which happens in the country today, a recall is easier from the US market and the European market being administered from India, but if it is a recall which is done for India market per se, 69% of the cases, it is not successful. So that means we are able to recall only 31% average. This picture is larger in few cases in bigger companies, but if you see the small and medium scale enterprises, we are talking about larger number of around 10,000 companies who are manufacturing in India and say that we are pharma companies distributing a product for the Indian patients. So it's a paradox today is we say that we talk about 20% of the world generics we make overall average in US number it is more, and 60% of the world's vaccines we are responsible, but we still rank 14th as far as value is concerned. 4th in volume, but 14th in value. And that's kind of a structural kind of a impact on the margins. It impacts the margins because ultimately, at the end of the day, the industries are working for margins, gross margins, profit margins, and what is it there for the organizations apart from taking care of the patients. When you look at overall what we are seeing today in the industry, there are major 4 fault lines across the supply chain, looking at the concentration risk of API from few countries like China. Today, we are seeing what is happening today about the quality drift which is happening in some areas. We will see some data. You all are aware what is happening across when the sample is withdrawn from approximately 7,500 samples which are taken in the country, around 300 out of that are considered to be not of standard quality. And this number is, many times we have seen that this number is growing. Overall, as I said, the visibility across the supply chain, the last mile connectivity where patient, if suppose a company wants to know that where my product is actually going, which hands this product is actually going, that transparency is still lacking today. I was there in GCC countries. Of course, it is happening in, everybody is aware, in US, in Europe, there is a track and trace system which is implemented. One of the earliest adopters of the track and trace was Saudi market. And then when you look at the products in Saudi market, even a small country, a city-like country like Kuwait, you have still a track and trace available there. And when I say I want to recall a product from that market, it's very, very transparent. The number is much more than 95% recall. In this case, in our country today, we are still somewhere close to around 30%. So these are the kind of risk which we are experiencing as far as the supply chain is concerned. So we will talk about the playbook, those 5 drivers of the playbook maybe a little later. And so let's look at what is the strategic pole position for India when we say overall around $60 billion market and 50% is domestic market, 50% is export. It is basically growing to reach $130 billion in 2030 and around 80 billion when you look at the market by 2021 as far as the local market is concerned, the market of India is concerned, with around 10,500 manufacturing units and around 650 US FDA compliant facilities. What we look today is this exports overall is growing at a large number compound annual growth rate of 9.4%, which is considered to be very, very healthy. And when you look at this number of 60 to 65 billion dollars by 2030, and the total picture of India overall is around $130 billion plus, which is going to be a very large number as far as the global pharma industry is concerned. So, as I said, we are ranked third by volume, moving from the level of fourth to third volume, but still 14th in value. So, let's look at what are those areas, 4 vulnerable areas, what supply chains today in India are suffering from. If you see, the stage 1 is, as I said, sourcing. We are still dependent, 72% of the bulk drugs getting imported from a single country, close to that number as far as drugs and intermediates are concerned, and that's China, which is a fault line number 1. Number 2, despite having a very large number of FDA compliant facilities, our number was approximately large as far as official action indicated is concerned. Official action indication is really a little more critical situation rather than the voluntary action indicated for facilities which are governed by US FDA. So this number over the last few years, this number has come down from somewhere around 19% to 9%, which is a major drift and positive drift which is happening as far as manufacturing is concerned. But when you look at the domestic manufacturing industry, the standards are different. You go to a small and medium scale enterprises, the level of Schedule M compliance for the current good manufacturing practices is today very low. The government is very keen to make sure this number is increased, and I think the government is very serious now to make sure the patients ultimately they are protected. One of the interesting things which you see from the fault line number 3 is the cold chain. You all are aware today the biopharmaceutical industry, the biotechnology base, the biosimilars, the more large molecules, the number is growing. But if you look at the cold chain management, which we all know, if you see this exhibition, there are cold chain partners. 80% of this sector is unorganized in India. And around 20% of the temperature sensitive shipments, they get degraded. Now, this is the number which is an average number. This number is high in many cases. This number is low in very large companies. You will see very large companies here in Hyderabad, so their numbers are low. But when we talk about an average, this number of 20% degradation of these products is a very large number. So we need to do something about this degradation which is happening. And the final one is the distribution. As I said, 69% of the total supply chain in India is not transparent. So you don't know where my product is actually going, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, which region my product is concerned. Look at a situation. An API supplier in Zhejiang in China, you see a delay which is happening in supply of an API. A formulation batch failure happens at Baddi, and a cold chain excursion happens in Guwahati. And finally, somewhere in the tier 3 places like places, you get a product which is on a stock out situation. So a lot of things are happening in this area. One shock, 4 multipliers, ultimately 1 missed dose to the patient. And that's more important. When we're talking about current good manufacturing practices, upgradation, facility upgradation, why we are doing all this? We are doing all this finally for the protection of the patient. But I think a lot needs to be done in this area. Still, if you see from year 2022, a lot of is being done on the single sourcing as well as the total supply of the bulk drugs, the APIs from countries like China. But from 22, this number has increased from 66% to 72%. This is the average number which is going on. That means we are still dependent heavily on countries like China. So what happens is China is controlling around 35% of the world's APIs, and you will see government is doing a lot in this area. PLI scheme, production linked incentive program by the government is being rolled out in few areas. There has been situations, but what we are seeing on the ground is the impact is still not visible for this change because it will take few years for this number to go down from 72%. Similarly, I was talking about this particular area from the quality improvement point of view. That's something which has improved in the last few years. If you see the data from 2013 to 2023, the decade, 19% official action indicated to 9% OAI number, which is based on the data from Bain and Company from US. And overall, when you look at, but what is happening today in India? On the other side, if you do sampling of the products from the India market, many of these products, around 1%, some people say 2%, the number is not of standard quality. Actual number may be more, we don't know. But situation is, lot needs to be done as far as small and medium scale enterprises where there are issues. Schedule M is rolled out, 2026, it is implemented. Many organizations, there are different levels of this implementation, but when I see situation on the ground, things are not very rosy right now because lot needs to be improved for these 90% of the small and medium scale enterprises which are there, which are still graduating above to a Schedule M level. So this is something which overall when you look at, this is the slide which I was talking about, from 19% it is reduced to 9%, and this number of not of standard quality, this number is hovering between 1 to 2%. So overall, when you look at the cold chain area, the fault line number 3, which we were talking about, around 2,500 crore, it gets lost or get damaged or degraded every year because of this cold chain failures. So overall, if you look at, as I was saying, 80% of this sector is unorganized. Only top-end companies, they have a very organized way of cold chain management. And 20% of these temperature-sensitive products, they don't reach finally the patient the way it was required to be stored. People are saying, the big companies are saying, yes, our cold chain systems are very good, they are very stable, but many times you see this number which we have today at the top 2 to 3%, 5% of the companies, which is more stable, but more than 90% of the times, these cold chain failures have been reported. Many organizations have started implementing Internet of Things, AI-based cold chain management systems. There has been a reduction in the deviations due to temperature excursions, but that is happening in very few cases. That's what I want to drive. When we are talking about India, we may talk about metro cities, these impacts are happening, or tier 1, tier 2 cities, but look at tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 villages, towns, whether my product is reaching those patients at the same temperature what is required to be stored. So yes, this is the fault line number 4, the visibility, the distribution area, which we were talking about, that 80% of manufacturing, it lacks visibility today. And I was saying 69%, it's not transparent. Overall, when you look at stockists, around 50,000 to 60,000 stockists overall. And we need to really look at this area as an area of improvement, or we can say a continuous improvement process. We talk about online pharmacies. Online pharmacy still, as far as India is concerned, is around only 2.5%. The rest of the people are still going to pop and mom based, all hardened shell pharmacy shops. And Jan Aushadhi is only still less than 1%, though India is pushing a lot on a Jan Aushadhi scheme. When we look at the case study, now I'm giving you a background what is happening over the 4 areas of the fractures which are there as far as supply chain is concerned. What we look at is a company, I call it as a pharma company or Pharma Co India. Without naming a company, this is a company with a revenue of 25,000 crores, portfolios going into generics, chronic, biosimilars, all biologics growing into these areas, markets present 60 plus countries, US and EU regulated manufacturing, 12 sites, 5 sites are approved by US FDA. Now, what happens in this company, and this is a situation which happened in the last couple of years, and what you see is a single source reliability of APIs for this company, because generally what happens is it may be a cost driver, maybe reason is availability as well as the lower cost is the availability of is one driver when saying that only one source of API for a product created disruption in 2021, and this halted 3 facilities, 6 weeks, no manufacturing for that product, around 120 crores were lost because of one product going out of this supply chain as far as the sourcing of API was concerned. So when we talk about these 4 pillars, what this organization did is moved into 4 areas, and we'll come to 5 drivers little later. But what this company did was they created backward integration with the help of the PLI scheme into 12 top and 12 critical APIs, commissioned 2 dedicated blocks in Andhra Pradesh, bulk drug park, PLI linked capex of around 800 crores was invested, and overall we see around 42% reduction on China dependence for this company. Formulations, if you look at multi-shore formulation manufacturing sites, a dual sourcing was created for 80% of the top 50 SKUs in the companies. 50 top products, 2 plants, and created a satellite fill finish facility in Gujarat, reduced the stock out situation by around 28%. As far as the cold chain was concerned, we were talking yesterday about AI in the industry. So India is going through a learning curve as far as digital twin is concerned. That means you are operating manufacturing facilities using virtual digital twins sitting far 1,000 kilometers or more away from the manufacturing site and controlling this manufacturing site. These projects have already started in India with the bigger industries, bigger companies here in India. And I would say one of them is located here in Hyderabad. And they created a cold chain digital twin, specifically looking at a cold chain. And with IoT sensors installed, real-time temperature monitoring going on, they reduced this temperature excursions from what it was by around 68%. And when we talk about the transparency in the supply chain at the last mile, that means reaching the final product to the patient, what it impacted was a 22 days recall period overall, if you see, and 22 days inventory number of days, but as compared to the average what is going on today in the supply chain in India is much more than 60 days. Some companies even have 90 days or 100 days of inventory, but this company actually controlled the overall inventory by looking at serialization, which I was talking about, track and trace. So if you pick even a VIX product in some countries, including I was giving example in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, you can actually see when with all barcoding in place and somebody scans it at the pharmacy shop, you will come to know full details about it. If the company, the manufacturing company wants to track where this product was manufactured, when it was manufactured, what was the time when this particular box was getting packed, everything is transparent through a track and trace serialization system. Serialization system is implemented in India only for certain export markets from India, but not implemented today as a requirement as far as the India market is concerned. But you will see more and more happening in this particular area. This track and trace actually helps you in creating that visibility, that transparency in the system, what we are looking at. So this company did a remarkable job in these 4 areas, 4 pillars. And if you look at some of the things which organizations have started looking at from learning from this case study and similar examples is to look at 5 levers, and one of that is a backward integrate and create your own API manufacturing sites, have full dependency as far as your formulation manufacturing sites are concerned. Look at the top critical APIs which are highly dependent on countries like China, and you have to cut down exposure, for example, from 72% to around less than 50% in the next 4 years, which is a very, very tough task. Organizations have started doing it. Average number may come still higher than 50%, but this is the target by 2030. We should be able to control this reliance on China by approximately 25% in the next few years. And the target is actually very, very tough, that we have to put this reliance around less than 50%. Another area is the lever 2 is to look at the dual sourcing of your SKUs. That means you have one plant which is, for example, based in Baddi, you have one plant which is based here in Hyderabad, and you have to look at sourcing in such a way so that you don't get into that kind of a stockouts, or partnering as far as the APIs is concerned for countries like Vietnam or Mexico or eastern part of the Europe. Look at having arrangements with companies or having a co-investment together by the companies in those low-cost countries where you reduce the failure because of a single point of contact for countries like China. The third area is the quality infra architecture. So lot is being done in this area. The government is pushing Schedule M as far as the India market is concerned. For global market, India is pushing into risk-based manufacturing, risk-based controls, how to avoid the data integrity so that we don't have inspection failures in the manufacturing sites which are supplying to countries like US or Europe. And as I gave you this data, today this number is around 9% official action indicated, which there are companies, including some alliances like Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, working together to make sure this OI number comes less than 5% than the existing number of 9%. The cold chain area, the fourth lever, is to look at creating artificial intelligence-based control towers or digital twins to look at how we can reduce this degradation which is happening of 20% to less than 5%. There are many organizations in India who are working with supply chain logistic companies to make sure that this degradation is reduced, but still lot needs to be done. And the fifth area is how to become more digital in the supply chain and create more visibility to make sure that if there is a recall is transparent to at least more than 95%, where the number today is very, very low, and also whatever is the existing number, average number of around 98 to 100 days of inventory by some companies to bring it down to 70. So lot needs to be done in this area. I would say lot has been done in India. What we are seeing today is the impact of many, many efforts which are being done, but lot needs to be done. If you see from the government is pushing this $12 billion investment of around 1 lakh crore into the PLI scheme, bulk drugs or bulk drug parks or biopharma Shakti programs, or working on revised Schedule M, where this year in January it was rolled as implemented. And overall, if you see, there's a package which is given to push it to 60,000 crores, which is impacting overall supply chain. So what Indian companies or pharma leaders need to do in the supply chain in the next 2 years is just, I would say, a suggestion. I'm not a person to advise companies, but this is something which I would say encourage the leaders to look at your single source APIs which are there. With my experience in the Japanese market for more than 15 years, I realized that the single source API is a very, very risky thing to do, and it's important to look at a dual sourcing or maybe a 3 sourcing for some of your top areas. or critical APIs which are difficult to manufacture in India, and we have a higher reliance on these particular APIs. And to look at implementing Schedule M more, not only from the audit point of view, but also more from real implementation, and to look at creating pilot schemes for encouraging cold chain management in areas, especially biologics, especially biosimilars. You see semaglutide, products like this are very vulnerable for temperature excursions. You have many products like this which are on the way, they are in pipeline. You will see more and more products into this category. So cold chain management has to actually take up. But overall, I would like to end this thing by giving you a practical framework of five Ds of. One is to diversify into areas including multiple suppliers of API, multiple suppliers of your finished dose manufacturing areas. And second D is digitize, make it more visible, more transparent, more predictive through artificial intelligence-based systems, more decentralizing the capacities, the storage places, the warehouse distribution systems, and cold chain management in such a way so that as close as possible to the patient and to the hospitals and institutions, these products are available. How to de-risk these contracts from single sourcing to multi-sourcing models. So there is a shared risk and supplier agreements. That means the risk is shared between the API supplier and the formulation manufacturer for very critical APIs. And the fifth area is design for such scenarios. Design your facilities, design your systems. How do we respond to scenarios like war, scenarios like what we have seen recently, what is going on across US-Iran war, and earlier in the COVID-like situation? We need to create, how do we really use risk management? Actually, if you look at, the whole area can be controlled using a good model of risk management for those critical APIs and critical products where sourcing is resulting into a stockout situation. So we are going to talk more and more about this area during this panel discussion. And I think if you have any questions, probably that would be a good time for us to have a discussion on this supply chain resilience. Thank you.